In the first program, Basic Routing, I dealt with the router mainly handheld. In this video, we're going to show you some more advanced techniques. We're going to show you the router as an fixed overhead machine, converted to a spindle moulder, and also some advanced handheld work. Now, if you're into high volume production, a large and powerful machine such as the Wadkin is needed. But for the average workshop, the router stand that can be easily converted either to an overhead router or a spindle moulder is perfectly suitable. Now, we're going to start with showing you some techniques involving the overhead router. My very good friend here, John Tigg, is going to assist me, and we're going to discuss various aspects of routing throughout this video. Now, how's it going, John?
Right, Roy, I've set the machine up, set the depth of cut, carried out the safety checks. I'm just going to place round the safety guard and we're ready to go.
Jolly good. Now, on the subject of safety, particularly in a commercial environment, it is most important that you observe all the necessary safety regulations, both from a point of view of the machine itself and from personal protection. Now, as with hand routing, the art of the whole craft really lies in the jig making. The skill is in the making of the jigs. This is a simple, well-made jig. The shape which is to cut out is formed on the underside, in this case in 9mm ply. Tufnel or metal can be used if longer runs are envisaged. And in this connection, it's worth mentioning that quite often if you've got more than, say, 10 of an article to do, it's worthwhile making up a jig. You'll note these overrun stops on the outside of the jig, which are to prevent the operator's hand striking the cutter should the jig jump the guide pin. It's very important that the workpiece is correctly positioned in the top of the jig, and the usual method is to strike centre lines and line it up in that manner on both sides. Now, the workpiece is located in the jig by means of these 4 strips and secured with turn buttons. Right, anything to add to that, John?
Yes, in this instance we're doing one-to-one routing. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch diameter cutter and a 1/4 inch diameter pin. But if you're going to use a larger cutter, you need to use the guide roller fitted to the top of the pin. It's all ready to go now, Roy.
Now, the cutter is lowered by means of a foot pedal, thus.
Nice cut there, Roy.
Yeah, that's fine, isn't it? Right, let's now go into another application. Right, now we have the router stand fitted with a high-frequency motor which runs off a 3-phase converter. This converts single phase to 3-phase. The motor is variable speed, suitable for volume production. The securing of the work to the jig is by means of a vacuum pump which is connected to the jig with a flexible pipe. Now, John, what about the jig?
Right, well, this jig is a special one designed for vacuum holding. We have a Tufnel base because of the volume work, so it'll last a long time. The jig is constructed in 2 parts with a railway track running down there to allow the air in. There's a neoprene seal so that the air does not escape once the workpiece has been placed on. The workpiece is now secure and we're ready to start routing.
That's very good. An artist's palette in less than 30 seconds. Couple of points with the vacuum pump. First, ensure that your workpiece is perfectly flat, and secondly, ensure that you have a pipe that won't kink. Right, John, let's have a look at the next job with the overhead router. Right, now we're going to have a look at the bench-mounted router stand. This one is fitted with a heavy-duty variable speed router, dust extraction, and a hold-down facility for the particular job that we're going to do, which in this case is a raised panel. The machine is fitted with a large diameter panel raising cutter. Right, John, now perhaps you could tell us a bit more about the cutters.
In this instance, we're going to use a large diameter cutter with a 1/2 inch shank, so we're using a heavy-duty router. We've slowed the speed down on the router to 12,000 RPM to achieve a good finish.
Fine. Right, now I can do the job apart from a final safety check to ensure that my fences are secure and that the hold-down unit is firmly in place. I shall make the cut end grain first to avoid breakout. There we are, nicely moulded panel, formed quickly and easily. Right, now I'll show you how to make kitchen cabinet doors. Now this is the type of door we're going to make, and the job involves a process known as profile scribing. We do the scribe first, that's the end cut, followed by this moulding. Now this of course involves a change of cutter. Now John's setting up for scribing. How's it going, John?
Well, I've cut all the timber to length, squared off the ends, so that is ready. I've also adjusted the cutter to be at the correct height to give a nice finish. I'm going to just put down the guard for safety. And I've put a spelch block on the back of the fence to stop any breakout.
We then change the cutter and form the profile.
I've now taken out the scribing cutter and put in the profile cutter and adjusted it to the correct height. I've added an additional side pressure guard, and we're going to use a push stick for safety. and we have a nice clean cut.
Finally, the door is glued, cramped up, cleaned off, and a first-class job is the result. Right, now while we're in the kitchen, I'll show you an interesting way of jointing kitchen worktops. Kitchen fitters experience difficulty in forming an effective joint between two adjacent work surfaces, and this jig effectively solves the problem. A powerful router of at least 1850 watts is required, fitted with a 30mm guide bush, a 12.7mm diameter cutter with a 50mm depth of cut. The job is completed in 4 passes. We're now going to do the second part of the operation, forming the male cut. First we place the worktop in position, clamp it, and the male portion of the jig fits into place. The template is fixed and the same routing principles apply as before. This shot shows the completed joint. Now the next job we're going to do is a simple tongued and grooved joint. This can be most easily done with the router set in the spindle mode. Now this is a table that I've made up myself in the workshop. The main features are that the fence is a direct copy of a spindle fence with all the facilities that offers, plus some quite interesting hold down springs. The cutter that we should be using in the first instance will be the tonguing cutter. This is set for tonguing. We then reset the machine with that cutter removed and form the groove. Now the machine has been preset and I'm just going to ask John to run the moulding for me. We just insert that in there to balance it up. Remove it. A double cutter to form the tongue, and then we remove that cutter there, and we have a single cutter to form the groove. Right, just lower the guard. And ready to go. Well, that seems a pretty straightforward job. Right, let's now go and tackle some stair trenching. Now we're going to deal with stair trenching. Now this operation was a time-consuming and tedious job by hand, but now with a modern router and a suitable jig, it can be performed quickly and efficiently. The string is marked out in the conventional way with just a line marking. Then the jig is adjusted to suit the pitch. Locked in position, and we're ready to route the first tread and riser. Now, the router is fitted with a suitable cutter. John, would you like to show them the cutter?
For this job we're going to use a heavy duty router of at least 1.5 horsepower. The base of the router is fitted with a circular sub-base and an adjustable nosing piece. The cutter has a 95-degree angle on it, which will give a slight undercut, thus giving a nice tight finish when wedged up. It's also been set to cut to a depth of 12mm. Oh, that seems a nice cut. Let's see how the tread and riser fits. Put the wedges in. And that's a nice joint.
Right, now let's do some dovetailing. Now the dovetail has always been considered an attractive and effective joint. It's difficult to do by hand, but if you have a portable router and a suitable jig, you can quite easily achieve good results. This jig will accept material up to 12 inches wide and ½ an inch thick. For the purposes of the exercise, we're going to assume that we're doing a draw side and front. The front is placed horizontally in the jig and butted up to its pin, and the side is placed vertically and butted up to its pin. The pitch plate is then placed in position, and we're ready to route. The router is fitted with an 11mm guide bush, a fine adjuster, and a suitable dovetail cutter. The height is adjusted to 15.5mm and checked with the template. We are now ready to route. Would you like to have a go at it, John? Lightly scoring the wood before cutting the dovetails avoids breakout and gives a better finish.
There we have a nice neat joint.
Right, a couple of tips on dovetailing. If the joint is too loose, you increase the depth of cut, and if the joint is too tight, you decrease the depth of cut. And now for something entirely different.
This is a Routergraph, mainly used by sign makers. It works on the pantograph principle. The motor is mounted here. In the motor we have mounted a cove cutter. The height is adjusted by the fine height adjuster, and also we have dust extraction fitted. The workpiece is mounted here underneath the motor. The arm is guided by a stylus pin. The templates are mounted in the template carrier, and there are many different designs of template. To start off, you place the stylus in the first letter and gently lower the motor into the workpiece, and then continue to route, following the template. Now we shall begin. Lift up the router, switch on,
Yes, that's an interesting device. Well, that concludes the programme on advanced routing. I've selected from the many techniques available those that I hope you will find interesting and profitable.